I'm just here just to say, to welcome you and encourage Nicholas and this wonderful project of music lessons. I just learned that I thought they were going to be voice lessons.
Well, we're doing it.
And I understand Marina is stuck with her car problem. But, I think this is a great idea, and I wanted to encourage all the singers to come, but of course everybody has a busy schedule, and so in summertime it's hard. But anyway, God's blessing be upon you all. I don't want to take too much of your time, but Nicholas, thank you for doing this, and I hope it goes well. I'm sure I'll hear a lot of feedback from folks in the very near future, and I hope you all learn. And God be with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so this is going to be a little new for me. Did everyone get a copy of this? So this is a
public school?
I have taught some after-school programs at public schools, and teach mostly privately in classes for children mostly. So this is a big class for me, so forgive me. But
do you feel overwhelmed?
No, not yet. Well, we'll see. In 15 minutes. No. I've been teaching for years, so it's not too big.
If you keep it on a child level, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm hoping to. I don't want to go too fast. If it's a review for some people, then bear with me, and but hopefully we can have things for everyone to learn, and also questions at the end if anyone has any particular, maybe more advanced things they want to know, if I can tell you the right answer. I want to get an idea of what everyone is. Some of you in the choir have been singing for a long time, but everyone's level of music education and ability. If you want to just go around the room, anyone?
I had 10 years of grade school instrumental music, and then 6 years of choir.
Cool. Your musical background?
I've done theater for 5 to 7 years, and then I sang for like 4 years or 3 years, and then this is my first year in
she has a fabulous voice.
I sang in a children's choir, and then freshman year the Emory Chorale where I went to college, and then church choirs off and on throughout the years, but I do not play music. So it's strictly by ear.
Yeah.
So I've got to stand next to someone.
I play the instruments. I've been in the Russian choir, Slavonic one, for about like 8 months.
Do you read music?
A tiny bit. I couldn't before, but it's kind of come to me a little bit.
Yeah. Because that's what I would like to get a sense of too, is where everyone is in their reading ability, since that's probably the main thing to work on first, is just reading the notes. So
I learned some guitar when I was a kid. I don't really have much experience.
You've been singing in the choir for a few months.
Yeah.
Read a little.
Yeah.
Hi. I read music. I played piano when I was young, like about 8 years. I sang some decades in St. John's. I read music.
Hello, my name is Yevdokia. I sang in a school choir. I've never read notes, so I'm starting from the scratch.
Okay.
I played the guitar in distant lessons, but St. John's was the first choir that I sung.
Okay.
He designs beautiful signs too.
And you do read music, right? More or less?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Functionally. Julia?
I don't read any music. I play the choir, but I just sing by hearing. So, no instrument experience.
Great manager though.
I I'm Andrew. I'm with Julia as far as music to me. I had piano lessons, I guess, when I was 4 or 5 for a couple of weeks. I was quickly withdrawn because I had trouble practicing. And trouble practicing, finding time to practice. I joined the choir about a year ago, and I'm having a lot of fun. I don't read music at all, and I'm gifted to stand next to Caleb and Will, who helped me get on pitch as necessary. I'm here to learn.
I'm Allie. My last music experience was as a kid. I played the violin, and I was in the Glee Club in junior high school. So I do a little bit of music reading, but not very much. So I'm here because I'm hoping I like to sing, and I didn't think that I would be able to sing in a choir, but maybe I do. So I think people don't have a lot of experience, so I'm just. If I'm not up there, I'll be singing down there. Singing along.
I'm Svetlana. I'm Emma's mother. I can read some basic notes. I used to play a little bit of guitar and piano. I sang all my childhood in the school choir, but I never sang in the choir here in church, starting from scratch.
That's good. Will?
I missed the question. Sorry, I can't.
Oh, I'm just getting a sense of everyone's musical background and whether or not you read music and.
Okay. Yeah, I play piano and I can read music, but I'm relatively new to singing.
Put you on the spot. What is your musical background? Yeah. None? Do you read music?
Andre's mother.
Oh, okay. All right. More people coming. Good.
More table?
Yes. There is. Is there? Pass them all out. Made like 25. Yes. Yeah. This is the original. The only thing is there's 2 more pages, so you can take one of these. That would take
Actually, some people may be going to Bishop Jones.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to
All right. And Caleb, what is your background in reading ability?
So when it comes, I guess in general, when it comes to music theory, I don't really know. But that being said, I'm an oboist in addition to a singer, so I can read, both bass and treble.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I was taking some classes in college and didn't finish classes.
So you can read okay. Okay, so, but it sounds like a lot of people don't really read well. So that's the first important thing to start on. So we have here the treble clef and the bass clef down here. These are also called the G clef and the F clef. And you can always remember the note. Right here, this dot is a G on the treble clef. This here is an F. So that dot on those should be properly written to hit that note. And this system of music did originally come from church singing in a Gregorian chant system. They had a similar, in the Middle Ages, a similar system, usually with kind of diamond-looking notes that has eventually evolved into what we use today. But it was developed for that. So, as most people know, the notes go up in pitch when they go up the staff, and down when they go down. The easiest way, I think, to learn how to read the notes here is just to remember the spaces here, which are, let's see if I can put this in here, F, A, C, and E on these notes. And then down here, this is A, C, E, and G. And it goes through just normally, you know, we have notes up to G, all of them, and G. So it starts back over from G, back to A. I think maybe in Russia they use H. Is that correct? I don't know. I know in some systems they have H instead of G, but for English we use G. So in between here, if this is A, we have a B on the line here. So this would just go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way up. But if you can remember these spaces, it's easy enough to find quickly, without having to count through all of them, find quickly where you are and pick out the note. So if we had, say, this note right here in the middle, if you know this is a C, then this is going to be one above that, which would be
D.
D. Good. And in the middle here, between the two staves, is middle C. So there is, it looks usually like there's more space in between the staves, but really there's just one more line here. So this is a G, this would be A, B, that's middle C, D, and then E, and we're back to F up here. So does that make sense to everyone pretty well? Same thing with ledger lines. If you go below the staff, well, we have A here, you can count backwards, G, F, E. Right? And there can be ledger lines that go up above the staff here, and so on. So that's the basics. It takes practice, of course, to get good at that, but I would start by picking out the notes, especially if you have some free time. Just practice trying to sight read the notes and just remember bass for treble clef, and there's no good way to pronounce this, for bass clef. There's mnemonics, but I don't know if that really helps. So yeah, that's pretty clear? Okay, good.
Every good boy does fine.
Yes, you can remember the spaces, the lines rather, as well. E, G, B, D, F. And that can help if you can remember both. But I think it's, at least for me personally, I find it quicker to just look at the spaces and then read the lines in between. Of course, once you get good at it, you're going to be reading it automatically. But I think when you're beginning, that's a good way to do it. And if you ever need to figure out that the ledger lines are hard to sight read usually, unless you know where you are. But that's the basics. Now, the other important thing are sharps and flats. A sharp is going to modulate the note up, and a flat will bring it down. So if we have you have a, right here, D, we have a, this would be D sharp, so it's actually that would be D sharp, which would be above. You have the D. D sharp is a half step, which is the next note up. If this was a flat here, it brings it down a little bit. You won't ever really see them in our music. Do exist double sharps and double flats, but they're not really necessary most of the time. It's the same idea. It always basically adds or subtracts a half step, which is the smallest increment we use. And then there's also the natural symbol, which in a key that already has a sharp or a flat would just basically negate that, null it. So, and that would be, it's always on this side. So natural, if we were playing in a key that had a D flat in it, and you saw that, it just means it would be D natural, which in that case would be higher than it would normally be. But, so let me see. So, half steps and whole steps. Let me draw a little piano here. It says easy enough to visualize. Little piano. So the smallest interval we have is a half step here. And that would be just to the next black key. And a whole step would be from, say, a white key to the next white key. Though on the piano we also have some where there's two white keys, like this would be E and F. This would also be a half step. There's no key in between. So we have 8 pitches in a diatonic harmony. So there's always going to be half steps and whole steps in any scale, unless you had a weird whole tone scale or something. But so the major scale and steps. So
Yes, it was Paul.
So in our C major scale, which on the piano is just all the white keys, and in any major scale we have this order of whole step to each next, I think I wrote this wrong actually, these should be over. So this would be C, it is a whole step from C to D, E, half step up to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, and then a half step back to C. So this is our normal order of whole steps and half steps in every scale. From C, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And we can construct basically all of our scales. Any major scale follows this pattern, and if we rearrange it a little bit, we can get a minor scale, which is contained inside of the major scale. Does that make sense? No? Okay.
Sorry. Yeah,
Questions?
Could you repeat that last comment?
Yeah. So, which part? Where's that?
About the minor scale and the major scale.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get onto that a little bit because that's a little confusing. But as to what a half step and a whole step is, does that make sense? All right.
What are your symbols, W and H?
That whole and half. Sorry.
So when you look at the keyboard, you don't have the black thing on the keyboard consistently, they kind of skip.
Yes. Yeah. If we have, draw a little keyboard up here. We would have 2 black keys down here, and then you would skip one, and there's 3. So the entire keyboard is groups of 2 black keys and 3 black keys. And that's how you tell what the notes are on the piano, because otherwise it would be very confusing. So this would be C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C. That would be our C major scale there on all just the white keys. You don't use the black keys for that. But yeah, there are groups here. So again, with this is a whole step, because we have a black key in between. This is another whole step, the black key in between. This is a half step, there's no black key. This is a whole step, whole step, and this is another half step. And that series, that pattern of whole and half, is what gives us the major scale, what sounds like a major scale. Rearranging these orders of whole steps and half steps is how you produce any scale. Always a combination of those. And most of the ones we use, I mean, we mostly use the major and minor scale. Those are both within this sort of pattern, and there's also the modes, which we don't usually sing in, but they're used in a lot of music. Those are also basically a reordering of this pattern. Not an entirely new order, but just a different subset. So if we were to start on A, this would be a whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F, whole step to G, back to A. That would give us a minor scale. All right, so that's our major scale, A minor. It's the same series, but we're starting here. So whole, whole, half, whole, half, whole. It's a different order. Does that make sense? Okay. So they're related. They use A minor and C major, which C major is sort of the parent. A minor is the relative minor. It's contained inside of it. The chords that are made up of those notes would be the same between them. They just have a different emphasis. So, and we get all of our major chords are within that key. So we have, if we're playing in C major and we have only white keys, if we just make a major chord here and go up the scale, we produce all the chords that are in C major normally, naturally.
Is a chord always 3 keys?
At least. Not always exactly 3, but yes. A chord is at least 3 notes. 2 would just be called an interval, or maybe a dyad, but nobody really says that. But a 3-note chord is called a triad. So 3. Now you could have a 7th, and that would be 4 notes. Nobody says quadrant. There's a word.
Tetrad.
Tetrad. There you go. I knew that word. Yeah, so if you take those 3 notes, which in this case are the root, 3rd, and 5th, we'll go over that in a minute, and you just go up the scale, that's chords. It makes up your chord, your key, and all the music there, basically. It's a very broad overview of harmony. But it's all contained within the scale. And that's why these things are outside of the scale. This would only be relating to stuff that is natural. Sharps and flats would be borrowed from another key usually, or sometimes just sort of inserted randomly, if they sound good. It all depends. But oftentimes the sharps and flats come from modulating partially to another key, borrowing a chord from a different key signature. And that is the basics of what a key signature is what notes are sort of in the set that we are drawing everything from, where the chords are coming from, and does that make sense? Have a question?
Do you want me to go turn that off?
Yeah, that'd be.
That'd be good.
Can you explain again what a key signature is?
Yeah, so a key signature is, it's sort of like the palette that you're going to be drawing from. It's this series of notes. In the key of C, we have these keys would make up the key of C major. In the key of F, for example, we would have a B flat, and that would be, instead of a regular B, there would be no B, just a B flat instead, and that would be the key of F. So all of the keys are very closely related. It only takes that one different note.
Because you're still following the whole half pattern.
Yeah,
Because you're
it's the same.
sticking to that same
Exactly. It's the same pattern. It all comes down to that.
You
So
have to add the B flat in order for that pattern.
yeah, because if we were to play without the B flat, you see it doesn't sound right. So you need the right order there, and figuring out any key is a matter of applying that order to the sort of shifting landscape of these flat keys and the way it all breaks down. But
And why doesn't it sound right?
why doesn't it sound right? Because you've messed up this order.
So that order is really how we hear things.
Yeah, that's the scale. But whatever note you start on, it doesn't matter. If you hear that, no. So it doesn't really matter what note you start off. You have to build the major scale the same way in order for it to sound major.
So, sorry, so in essence, I mean, is that basically like how our ears have developed, like over time, or?
I mean, it's how we've developed culturally over time. But the major scale is found pretty much in all cultures. It's pretty ancient.
I think it has to do with the ratios of frequencies.
It does have to do with the ratios of frequencies, and it's
like an octave is 2 to 1.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an important thing. Is the octaves from C to C is a doubling of that frequency. So this A440 that we usually tune to up here would be A880 because it's double the frequency, double the hertz, which is the speed of the waveform. So the octaves are all double or half. You want to go below 220, 110, down to 55. Yeah. So that everything else that comes between those over the years in different cultures and tuning systems, there's been a lot of ways to get from point A to point B, and it is complicated. And but we've developed since around the 1700s at least. We've had our current system of tuning, what the frequencies and the ratios are between those notes that makes it sound major or minor. But ultimately, throughout time, humans have developed a similar system everywhere. May have been a little different. It wasn't the same as modern music, but you can find the similarities. So I do think it is a natural thing. It's what we're all drawn towards when it comes to beautiful music. It's not completely arbitrary. And they did try in the 50s with some of the modernists to reorient babies' brains to modern atonal music, and they hated it. So it's something that's innate. You're born with it in you. It's not totally arbitrary and not easily changed. So, but there's a lot of different ways of getting there. So, and all of the major and minor and all the modes are different ways of breaking down the same bass set. But there's a difference between reordering this set of notes and inserting a new note, like a flat here. If we want to play F, we would use B flat and not play this note. And if we wanted to play G, we would have F sharp and no F. Right? And that again is just the same. It's the same order. We're transposing, moving the whole set up or down. But then you can also go within that, reorder the notes, and that'll give you a different sound, like minor. Right? Does that make some sense? Any questions? Any points?
So when we sing a cappella style and we're all singing like our different parts, and now I understand the treble clef is like where the altos and the sopranos live typically, and the baritone basses and tenors will live on the bass clef.
Yeah.
And when we're all singing different notes, like the goal is to like sing a chord, basically, right?
Yeah.
So if you just put it on the measure, we would all at different times be singing.
Yeah.
In harmony. With the chord.
Exactly. And usually the basses will outline the lower notes, the root and the fifth of the chord, and the sopranos play the third usually, right around there, and then the tenors, and they might sing the root or the fifth. Not an expert composer, but yeah.
So the 8 tones that we sing in church music, like they're not really keys, but they're also not really not keys. Like what are they? Like I've heard that they're related to modes.
In Byzantine music, they are basically keys or modes. As far as I understand, the Russian tones are melodies. They are actual, right? Yeah. So they're actually a set melody. I don't know if they go through different modes or if they're all.
I'm sorry, what are modes?
Okay. Yeah. So if we have, sticking with C, since it's easy, our first mode from C to C is the major mode or the Ionian mode. The second mode, if we were to take same notes, no white or black keys, from D, that would be the Dorian mode. And you can hear, there's our major mode with the Dorian mode is quite different. Same notes, but different starting point. It's like a different emphasis. But if you play everything in that, if you base your melodies around, you know, hitting D in D Dorian, then and your chords. So let me see. You can hear all the harmonic relationships. Dorian's very different. If we play the E mode, they're all, you know, all those will sound some varying degree of sort of exotic, for lack of a better word. Our minor mode, we're all familiar with. That sounds more normal. Part of that is...
oh, is that why there's 8 tones? Because there's one for starting with each note in the key?
Yes. Originally. And again, in the Byzantine tones, those were based off of more like the modes. They were a set of scales. So I'm not sure exactly if they correspond one for each mode, but something like that. Now some of the modes are not very good. The Locrian mode, the last mode, is just not very good. Good luck doing much with that. It's weird. The chords, you know, they're in the wrong place. All the other modes you can use, and they're used in various things. You know, Dorian's very popular amongst jazz, and even in a lot of pop music now, they will use it to sound a little more different. Major sounds so major that it's, you know, sort of cliche sometimes. So the modes are good for using, you can be in the same key, but you can use something a little more, you know, spicy. And but yeah, some of them aren't useful. So I don't know exactly what the Byzantine modes or tones correspond to, but they're basically the modes. And those again also came. Our thinking about modes is developed from originally Western church music, from Gregorian chant, and they had, I think, 6 modes, which were a little different to what we have now, but a similar idea. And I think even the ancient Greeks had a similar system, so it's you know, common understanding. But let's talk about chords a little bit. And this ruler takes too long to use, so just put up a crooked, ugly staff here, which we'll have to do. And if we look at, let's take a major chord here. We haven't really talked about intervals yet either, so that's important too. But maybe we should talk about that first. Well, here is F major chord, and these are all stacks of thirds, major or minor. we'll talk about that. But essentially, from your note, from your first note, you have a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and the octave, right? So, and each of these could be major or minor, except for the fourth and the fifth, which are always perfect. They're, you can have a flat diminished fourth or a sharp augmented fourth or fifth, but those are rare. If we're working with just major or minor, they're always going to be the perfect fifth and perfect fourth, either way. So if we have here F, A, and C, and the treble clef, this is a major third. This would be a minor third up top, but more importantly, it is the fifth. So that outlines the chord. Now the fifth doesn't really inform whether or not it's major or minor. If I play just the F and the C, we'll fix that eventually. So the fifth doesn't tell us if it's major or minor. If I add a major third, we have a major chord. If I add a minor third, we have a minor chord. So, questions? You said you lost.
Yeah. Can you explain? You were just going really fast. For me.
Yeah.
You said this is a major, this is a minor. Now, what do you mean? Yeah.
Okay, so so we have our intervals here, and they're easy enough to figure out what it is. You can just count it. So if we have, just make another here. Again, we'll start with this. So this would be the one, should be unison, but this is a second. This would be a third, fourth, and fifth.
And those are, sorry, those are the intervals?
Yes, those are intervals. And it's easy enough to...
Between the notes.
It's, yeah.
So any note, the one next to it is going to be a second.
Exactly. So you start on the one, the root of the scale, and then you can just count up from there. The distance between C and D is only one. It would be a second. So your fifth, you can always count up from whatever your root note is, and you know, let's say 90% of the time, if this was a C sharp and you wanted to find the fifth of it, it's going to be a sharp. So you would just count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the letters, and if this was a C sharp, the fifth of it would be a G sharp. The fifth and the root, or the fourth and the root, are always going to have, they're either going to both be sharp or both be flat, most all the time. So then the third, which is our next most common interval, it's a crucial one, can be either major or minor, depending on where it is in that order.
Explain
right?
major and minor.
Yeah, so, well, we talked a little bit about the major and minor. So again, we have this order of whole steps and half steps. Where you take that from, how many, your total steps from one to the other is going to be major or minor. The minor is one less half step from the whole. So if we have C going up to our major third here, 1 half step, 2, 3, 4 half steps. There we have our major third. Minor third is just 1 half step left. So 1, 2, 3. It's sort of like the flat of the major, right? If that makes sense.
It's another relationship.
Yeah.
So the third is a general term, major or minor is the specific relationship.
The flavor. Yeah, because we could have, if we were in, this is C major here, if we were in A minor, we're going to start on A, but again, no sharps or flats. This would be, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your third would now, because we are in a minor scale, this is now a minor third. But they're both thirds. But because of their different placement in the order of things.
Missing a black note, as you'll notice on the keyboard, right? Like,
yes. Yeah. So
you've got one half step less.
Yeah, so you can't assume that any third is major or minor without knowing where it is in the key. Right?
Starting to. I have to sleep on it a while.
Yeah. So, well, one thing you can do is if you take any chord, you know, your standard chord shape on the piano, if you know how to do that, you can listen there for the major. If I take that major third down one half step, major, minor, right?
Major's happier.
Yeah.
Minor's kind of sad.
Exactly, yeah. There's, it's just something you have to hear, but you know, you can tell, and in the context of other chords, those are all major, you know, and they all have that sort of happy quality. If we do all minor chords,
There's a tension.
yeah, it's a very different sound. And so, but the difference between a major and minor third or a major and minor chord is only a half step, and the minor is smaller. It's the flat of that third. So,
Does it help to say how many half steps minor third is, for example, how many half steps a major third is? Does it help to think in that way?
So 1, 2, 3, 4. It'd be 4 half steps to get to a major third, and 1 less to get to the minor third. Would be 3 half steps. So it's just a smaller relationship, right? If we were to take, for example, this is a major chord. If we wanted to make this a minor chord, we would flat the third. So this would be now an A flat. And so if we take what it was before with the A natural, and we flat the third, now we have an F minor. Right?
What was a natural again?
A natural is the unaltered tone.
Okay.
Which is not necessarily major or minor.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a little confusing. It takes a while to set it.
Major and minor comes with the relationship between the notes.
Yeah.
If you play one note, it's not major or minor, it's just a note.
Yeah.
Its relationship with another note makes it major or minor.
Mm-hmm. And that comes from its position in the overall key, where it is in the scale, right?
So if a chord is like a G major, that's something I've heard before.
Mhm.
Is it because it starts with G, or what? How does a chord get
It's
its name?
a G because it starts with G. Yeah, that is the root note. That would be the first note in the chord. And then on top of that, to make it major, you would build a major third on top, and then you would add the fifth. But really, it would still sound basically like G major, even without the fifth. It just wouldn't technically be a 3-note chord.
So even though the other notes aren't G, they're related through the...
Yeah, that G major would be G, B, and D.
A third and a fifth.
A third and a fifth, yeah. And so if we take anything, so the major chord would be this. So you can figure out a third. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we know that our chords are built, the standard chord is root, third, fifth. Root, third, fifth. Right? Root, third, fifth.
And it always goes up the scale?
Well, there's inversions, but to keep it simple,
If I'm complicating things, then
no, it doesn't have to go up. It could go down. But the important thing is that this is going to be the name of the chord, the root. So if we're looking at C major, the root is going to be C. And then from there, we've got our root of C. We go up to our third. This would be E, and then our fifth is G. And since we're in the key of C major, we know that our first chord in C major is going to be major, and this is going to be major third. Now, again, there's not all the chords in C major are major chords. That would sound very weird. we need to have the minor chords and diminished chords come in naturally based on the order, based on this uneven whole step, half step relationship, which makes it, you know, a little complicated at first, but it makes it all musical in the end. So, does that?
It's helping.
Okay. So this here, yeah. So that's how you build any chord, but it's also how you would build a minor chord. So if this was, if we use the E flat, this could still be a third. It's the next note would be C, D, E, but if it was an E flat, then it would then be a minor chord. So in the key of C minor, you would have an E flat.
So for our purposes anyway, if we're going to do a minor, you would always modify the third.
The
right?
third is, yeah, that's the only thing that needs to be modified between major and minor. It's just the third. Yeah, so it's not too complicated. Those are your two main types of chords, and the important ones you need to know. It's just this formula of root, third, and fifth. This would be a major third if it was going to be major, or a minor third if it was going to be a minor chord. Bill? Any questions on that?
So my earlier question about singing chords, like the way the music gets laid out, the bass. So my understanding now is that the bass being the lowest note would determine which chord we're all singing when we're in harmony?
Basically. That really depends on the composition and what all is going on. So the important thing is that it would always contain these notes. It's not a guarantee that the basses are always going to be on the root and someone's going to be on the third. Someone is going to be on each of these parts. And typically the basses don't sing the third because it's too much of the sort of character or flavor of the chord, the major or minor quality. It's not going to be a long, all the times that the basses are holding out or singing many words, chanting it all on the same note, is almost always the root or the fifth, or maybe the fourth, but not going to be one of the sort of flavor intervals like a major or minor.
Plus the composers are really easy. Which we have.
It's also harder to sing.
Hence why tenors have more fun.
Yeah, well, the tenors do get to sing third. So, but that is, yeah, that's why also the bass typically sings either the root or the fifth, because that does establish sort of the ground of the chord for everyone. Now, in other kinds of music, like with different instruments, that may not be the case at all. Don't have the same system, you know. So, but even if someone is, you know, playing bass guitar in a rock band, they're usually playing the root or the fifth to outline the basis of the chord so that it sounds like the right chord. Because if I play this with the bass in the root, that sounds pretty normal. You could invert it so that you have the fifth in the root. Well, it's not the root, but the fifth in the bass instead of this.
So it's an octave down when you're doing that?
It's not an octave down, no. So if I take C, E, G, this would be called root position. An inversion is the different order of those notes. So the first inversion would be E, G, C. That would be the third in the bass. We wouldn't usually sing it that way. This would be with the third in the bass. That's doable, but we're not usually using that. Now the second inversion isn't too uncommon because that's the fifth in the bass. Right? So that's fairly common. As you know, for writing a melody for like sopranos, that you won't really have to worry nearly as much about chord tones. More about the scales, what's going on in the scale, and then writing tenor and alto parts. I don't know. That's for someone else to do. But that would be, you know, you would probably be a lot of the time outlining the you know, major or minor quality of the chord you're singing, right? Any questions?
You say alto or tenor would be more the third?
Yeah, more likely, yeah.
More likely.
Yeah, of course, it all
Sure.
it all depends, but
In
yeah.
most of our music is the alto. Like when I look up at what the women are singing, usually it looks like the alto is like the harmony for the soprano.
Yeah, and as far as I know, a lot of the time the tenors also sing like a harmony off of the alto part, right? Like a third below the alto.
Sometimes it seems like they're above.
Well,
I can't
But
resist.
it's, yeah.
Yeah, I can't resist saying that you may be singing Matthäus and Mercy of Peace, where the bass line and tenors go in third. So if you sing arrangements from the end of the 20th century, like 1980, Kostalsky, Trubachev, Matveyev, Smolinsky, so then sometimes the basses may have the melody, because the idea was that the melody would move from parts to parts, or they didn't have a third, or they had octaves. And so that was their style. It was called the Moscow style. So you have some music of these composers, arrangers. So the basses may sometimes sing the melody, or the altos, or tenors, and so they during the same piece.
Yeah, it's in more modern music, and I mean you'll see it all. Not in probably most pieces don't have a melody line in the bass, but it's not that uncommon that you'll have even just a bar of going up or down a scale, or something, or the altos or the tenors will take the melody. So it's certainly there's no hard and fast rules on any of this stuff, but that's just sort of the simple overview. Now when you're composing, you do what you want. But yeah, so the most important thing is just understanding the difference between the major and minor there. Is that making sense to most of you?
And so there's no change further elsewhere in the key between major and minor?
Yeah, exactly. So the only difference between this, if this was major, and minor, would be a flat third. You get into more complicated, bigger chords like sevenths and stuff, and things get a little more complicated. But a major and minor chord are simple. There's only two types without counting the inversions. And an inversion, just to explain, if we took this order, root, third, fifth, and let's say we put the root up here, this would be the first inversion. Same notes, but now we have the root up here. If we were to move this third up, this would be called a second inversion. Again, same notes. It's going to sound basically like the same chord, but the inversions make it so that we're not. If you were only using root position, it's just a little, can be a little basic. You use inversions, you have a little nicer voice leading, and also your voices aren't jumping around so much. So moving from one chord to the next, you may only have to go up or down one note, which is much easier for the singers than everyone jumping up a fifth, everyone jumping up a third or something like that.
You keep saying they're the same notes?
Yes, they are. In an inversion. So if I write it out as...
If it's C, D, well no, it would be C, E, G.
Yeah.
So one of them is moving to a different octave, but the rest aren't.
Yeah.
Okay, that's when I said, oh, so you've moved it an octave, I meant the root gets moved.
Yeah, this would be, the root, third, fifth. If I move this up, C goes up here. This is still our root note, but now we're stacking it up on top. And this is
octave. The C is an octave.
And now you would say that
E
is in the bass, but E is not the root.
Okay.
The root is the C, because that's the important note. That's how the chord is built. And this would not be an E major chord now. So it'd still be a C chord, but this would be a C first inversion. And again, if you did the same thing up here, put an E up here, this would be our third. This would be the second inversion. Our bass note would be the G here. It's still a C major, but it's a second inversion, and there's a G in the bass. Sometimes you'll also see, especially for piano and guitar or something, you might see it written like this, which would mean C major, with a G in the bass. You could also write, there's you could write it like this. I think that's correct. And that would also be a different way of writing that inversion. But you don't really need to know that for most choir music. But if you see that written on, if you're trying to learn a song on the guitar, you see C/G, it means the G is the bass, which basically means it's an inversion. Or you're adding another note to the bass, right? Any questions on that? Is anyone confused?
And inversions are to make it more interesting?
Yeah, it's just another tool.
It's another way, okay.
Yeah, and there's also a practical reason, because the inversions keep the notes closer together. So you don't have to jump all your notes around, and you can't really see the piano. But if I was to take C, B, G, the C chord, and I want to go to the 4 chord, which is a good choice, I'm playing F major, F, A, C, but I can reorder it so the C is in the bass, so moving from C major to F major, the basses could still sing the C, whereas the other voices are only moving up a step, which is a lot less movement than getting everyone to jump like that, which would be jumping down a whole fourth on all 3 voices. Much easier if you have one voice stay the same and the other voices move up by a whole step instead of up by a fourth, right? And the smaller the interval you have to jump, usually the easier it is. And also some intervals are just easier to hear and sing and jump to than others. So the main, we go over intervals a little bit. So if we start on F, our next note in the scale is going to be a G, and this would be our 1, our root. This would be our second. And you go to the next note, this would be our 3rd. Next note is the 4th. Next note is the 5th. 6th. 7, and then the octave is back to F. 8. So if you were to, if you wanted to stack, say, a 4th on top, it would look like that. And you might have 2 voices singing like that, singing the root and the 4th. You can also invert the intervals and their relationship. Same note can have a different relationship, but don't worry about that. But the important intervals to know, to be able to sight read especially, are either your second and your third, which are nearby. Those are your common jumps you're going to see, especially if you're singing a melody line like a soprano. You're going to commonly move up and down by smaller intervals, and then your 4th up here, or it could be below, is a common, and that's going to have one on a space or a line and another one on the opposite. So this one's on a space, this one's on a line. The 4th is going to always look like that. This could be on a line, this could be on a space, but there's the 4th, and then the 5th is also very common, and that's going to be from either a space to a space or a line to a line. Right? And those are the most common intervals you're going to have to sing. An octave is difficult. It'd be all the way up here, and that's, that covers a good amount of someone's vocal range. So it's a big jump to make. But recognizing if you have 2 notes, recognizing what the jump you have to make with your voices before you sing it, while you're reading along, and if you see that, just these 2, you have to go up just one whole step or half step, depending on again, where you are in the scale, right? And so, especially, you know, like for bass singers, knowing what a fifth looks like and knowing that you're going to have to go maybe from this note, have the fifth, down to here, reading that before you get there is going to help you out. If you know what the fifth sounds like, that you're going to jump down by that much or jump up by that much, right? Yeah, so if we're going up just the major scale, we have the second there, the third, the fourth, you might know that song. There's a bunch of songs that start with the fourth. And the fifth, which has a nice clear sound. The sixth you're not usually get to sing, or the seventh. Sometimes you have to jump a whole octave. But the most common are going from fifth to the root, fourth, or sing just between notes, going up and down by a second. Now also, these can be both scale degrees and intervals. If this is this scale, we could have these as the scale degrees, but you could also say that from this to this is a second. From this to this is a third. So, if we're only thinking about these as their relationship to the key, in this case F, which would have B flat here too, then you might think of these as the scale degrees, which would be written probably above, but with a little symbol like that. But a major third, there's several here. So from F to A is a major third. From G to B is a major third. From A to C is a minor third. From B up to D is a minor third. And so on, right? So a third is always that set distance. But it's not just in one place in the scale, you know? Does that make sense? So if we're going up something from, you know, a major third above something, doesn't have to be the third note of the scale, right? It's sort of, it moves. That makes sense? Okay. That's most of the first part. Is there any questions? Any ideas? Yes?
I feel like maybe we covered just a little bit too much ground today.
I know.
Yeah, I feel like some of the folks here, like including me, like can barely understand. For example, all I could really cross today was major chords sound happy, minor chords don't. Okay. And that is it. Like everything else is like Chinese to me, you know? So I don't know. I don't want to like...
I know. Well, it's difficult too because to me this is sort of basics, but it's hard to explain it if you don't already understand it. Right. So, but yeah, I do appreciate the feedback. So I want to make it understandable. So it's difficult because I understand it already. Yes?
You mentioned intervals. I mean, you explained intervals, which I appreciate, but scale degrees? Mm-hmm. What's a scale degree?
So if we're looking at this as it is, this is a F scale here. It has all these degrees. Every scale would have degrees from 1 to 8. It's sort of the same as in intervals. This would be the second scale degree, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth. It corresponds to the intervals, but an interval doesn't have to be a certain position in the scale, right? So a major scale has more than one major third interval in it, but there's only one third scale degree. In C, the third scale degree would be E, and you can figure that out: C, D, E.
It's the third note.
It's the third note, yeah.
So those are the
scale
notes in
degree
the scale.
goes to the scale directly. So whatever the bottom is, the scale degree is relative to the rest of the notes, however far away. The interval
So
is...
they're the notes in this particular scale.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the third scale degree will be the third note in that scale. The fourth scale degree, the interval depends on the
I get
relationship between the other notes.
Yeah.
Nice.
So when we're singing, like where do we start on the piano? Like how do we know where? Because there's like 8 tones, right? Like where are we starting? Like all the way here to the right, or like how do we? Is it like in the middle? Like or is it like we always like?
Middle C is useful for that reason. It is.
Tenors on a regular, like Lord of Mercy, the
Yeah.
tenors are on middle C. So this
And then where's that on the piano? Okay.
In the middle.
So like, are we pretty much like staying on the same
Roughly.
part of the piano, like, for
Well,
all-
yeah.
everything?
So middle C is usually where the tenors are, and the sopranos will go up about an octave and a half, which is the next C and then a little bit more.
Okay.
And then the basses will go down to the C below it, and then a little bit more. So
We're always
between middle
staying
C,
within the same
so there's like,
range.
yeah. So that's where we stay, because that's what voices are. You know, we have bossa profundos who can hit like really low notes, but we don't usually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we hang
related
out.
to this, when you pitch us at the beginning and you go to, when you're pitching us, how do, like
Yeah.
to
Do you
Julie's
want to
question,
explain that?
how does that
As the choir
tie
director.
back to the,
This is a practical knowledge.
I mean, it's very helpful because I know that then that's my first note and I can go off of that, but when you go through, what's actually happening to you?
Need more staff paper here.
So this is where the sopranos and altos are on the treble clef, and then we have the bass clef, which is the basses and tenors. So this is kind of smushed together. Usually there's the words here, and the altos will stay up here and the basses will be down, but for the sake of this. For an F major, which is usually our Lord Have Mercies, the basses are on an F, which is in an F major chord, is the root. The tenors are usually, for Lord Have Mercy, is on the 5th. So if we count up 5 notes from F, we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
1 is F.
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. 5. So we go to C, and that's middle C, which is right in between. The altos are usually on F as well. F, F. And the sopranos are on A. So when I pitch, and so this is the 5th, which is a C. And then we have the F again, which is, because a chord is 3 notes, we have 4 voice parts. So one of the notes is going to be doubled. It's not always the root, but in an F major it is. So this is again the root, and then the sopranos, like we talked about, are on the A, which add the flavor, which is the 3rd. So when I pitch, or when Paula pitches an F major chord, it goes tenors, so at the top, tenors, sopranos, altos and basses, ba, ba, bum. So that's how usually you pitch. Usually you give the tenor note first, then the sopranos, and then the altos and basses.
Do you give the tenor note first or the 5th first?
It depends. Usually the tenors are the first one to get, 9 out of 10 times they'll get the first note. That's why we point, because sometimes it's not. So, for example, if we do a D major, because that's another, the F major is one of the most common keys we use. Sometimes we use G major, which is the same thing, just shift it up 1. Everyone goes up 1 pitch. The D major, like the Chesnikov that we have after communion hymn. That one's actually complicated. Tone 1. Tone 1 starts on D major. D major is 1, 2, 3. It's an F sharp, but that's just because that's the way the relationship is. So the D major chord is D, F sharp, and then A. Again, that like the whole half step thing. When you start on D, you go a whole step, whole step. So you skip the half step, you go up to the whole step. So that's where you get the F sharp. So that key would have a sharp at the beginning of the piece, and it tells you that your Fs are sharp. So when we're talking about key signatures, if you look at the beginning, the symbols in front tell you in the place where they are, what note does what. So in an F major, like he drew over here, it tells you that Bs are flat because on the B line for treble clef, the B is flat. So in D major with an F sharp, the F in the beginning tells you that the Fs will always be sharp, unless it tells you otherwise, like with the natural. That's where the natural comes in, because sometimes...
So practical question, like if you weren't pointing at us, or forgot to or something, the only way we'd be able to know which note was ours would be by looking at the music, and like figuring out what the actual starting chord was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why you have me and Paula, because we do it for you. So a D major chord, you have the basses on a D, which is the root. The sopranos, or actually the tenors, sometimes they're on the fifth, like we just talked about with the fifth. So tenors, sopranos, altos, and basses. So the same thing we just talked about. So fifth, third, root, or tone 1 and tone 2 start with the tenors on a D. So if we look at the middle C, a D is one space up. So it goes on top of the ledger line. At least it wouldn't, but the way that the tenor music, if we're not looking at that, it sits like that, right? So that is also the root. And then the altos are on the F sharp, which is the third, and the sopranos are on the fifth. So in that case, I would give sopranos, which is the fifth, altos, and basses. And the way I get it, do, 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 because that's the actual tenor pitch, and instead of you having to take it an octave yourself, I'm giving you that pitch, that way you have your starting pitch. It's also easier for me, singing tenor, to start on the starting pitch. So that's why I point. Sometimes you have chords like, not to get more complicated, but in practicality, since now we're talking specifically about the music we sing, the Beatitudes. My most gracious Queen. In thy kingdom remember us, O Lord, when thou comest in thy kingdom. That one. We have the double choir arrangement, where it looks like this.
So by double choir, you mean the
sopranos and tenors.
altos?
The sopranos and tenors.
So this is going to be my other question. Double choir, are the ones and twos always a third apart?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
When it's written the way that, when it's written like this, when you have one stem for the two notes, that's telling you that they're singing in thirds and that the sopranos and tenors, because there will only be one voice part down here, which is the bass. So like I said, this has a B flat, and I think it also has an E flat. So that's a D and that's an E, and at the beginning of the piece it's telling you that the B will be flat and the E will be flat. Same thing down here. The B will be flat and the E will be flat.
So I always thought when you said it's a double choir that the sopranos split into high soprano and low soprano.
They do, but so do the tenors.
So
the tenors will sing
four
both parts
for those two parts. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the sopranos and tenors, the tenor 1 and soprano 1 will sing the top line, soprano 2 and tenor 2 will sing the bottom line, out of the two notes that are stacked together.
Off the part.
Oh.
And the alto will be the third voice. Now, in this case, you have the third, the root, the altos are on the fifth now, and the basses are back on the root. So ones, twos, altos receive the last note even though they're on the fifth. Back up to the one, which is what the basses will sing. So in that case, you give the third the root, the fifth to the altos, and then back up.
Do we ever do double choir with a minor third between the two parts?
What do you mean? I mean, we do have, like, we've done castano Krustalski, some of his fancy stihira, like that we sing at Christmas and Pascha and Ascension and all that, he has double choir pieces written in F major. So again, the B's are flat, and it'll be written like this. So the basses will be down here by themselves, and the tenors and sopranos double up here, and that's major. So this is what you're hearing. There's just more voices. They have soprano 1, soprano 2, alto, soprano, tenor 1, tenor 2, bass. So the minor that we just did, you would hear this. So you have 2 voices up here, the alto, 2 voices down here, and the bass is also one that they share a note there. So when you double a piece, it's basically adding, right, filling in more space. If when you see the piece that's written like this, and I say simple choir, the tenors will be on the top line, basses are here, sopranos are here. You're not adding the higher voice there, and you're not adding a lower voice down here for the tenors. Then the altos fill in right there. And like you said, this is a 5th. So you have G, D. You don't know what kind of chord that is? It's the B flat that you get from the key signature that tells you it's minor. If there was nothing there in the key signature, now you're in G major, which is happier. Happier, that. Questions, comments, concerns?
So back to my initial question, which was like,
when you pitch,
how do you pitch us, right?
And it depends on how the chord is written. But altos will receive their note usually last.
Because sometimes you'll come back around and you'll do the tenors last.
Well, that comes down to ba ba bum. When I do the ba ba bum bum, that's the same note as the basses. And I give it to you last and this is the high, just to jump at the octave for you, because this is what the chord is. But I give the chord like this, and so you gotta take this pitch and go all the way up here. But I do it for you. Also, because I have to do it myself because I'm singing that part.
And when you're like listening to your phone is giving you those,
yeah, it's the pitch
and
button.
then you're giving those to us so we can hear them.
Yeah.
And if you put them all together, we get a chord.
Yes. So I'm giving you, and then when you put them together, you get that. But I'm giving you, like I said, each person gets a specific chord or a specific note, and when you sing all those notes together, you get the chord. One person can't sing more than one note. I mean, they
So
can,
with that 3-note pitching, what are the intervals again from there? You're doing the 5th, 3rd root, or
when the tenors have the 5th, sopranos, altos, and basses, so tenors is
so
usually
yeah.
So I give the 5th first.
Your 3rd,
But then if we're in a different key and the tenors don't have the 5th, they have the 3rd, the tenors will probably receive. The tenors receive the first note unless they are the root.
I think his question, which is also my question, is do you always go 5th, 3rd root?
No. No. Like I said, like the Beatitudes that I talked about, I gave the 3rd, the root, then the 5th to the altos last, and then back up to the 5th.
But you always either give 3 notes or 4 notes, basically.
I give 3 unless like I said, the tenors have the root.
Exactly.
Because then I'm giving them their actual pitch rather than having to, because this is their pitch.
Yeah.
But they have to start singing up here.
Yeah.
So I'm giving them do, 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 do. So they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May I add something? As a female director, I have female tenors. So while I guess male tenors would get my do, la, 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 but I give to women do, la, la, tenor, women tenors, back to basses, and altos, male tenors, sopranos, altos, basses, female tenors.
And that's just relationship with being able to hear your pitch. When she was director, it took me a while to be able to take her pitch, because when she would give, because F major chord, I give it, That's where the tenors start. She would give it.
Put it
So
down
I'd
to the
have to
octave.
go.
Yeah.
And I would do that myself. So after a while, she would actually, the way she would get it down to the fifth tenors, pick up, and then you try to hear that pitch.
And
So
more
it all
fun.
depends on.
If you go to Finland, they keep a pitch like this. I don't know why, but that's how they give it. Sopranos, basses, altos, tenors, spectral altos and basses.
When I first started, I gave the altos their first pitch because it was on the fifth. I got yelled at for it. You're like, I didn't know what pitch is, just because church, that's just how church singing is developed. That's just how the altos learned. And so when I gave them their first pitch, they're like, yeah, we didn't know what note we were on. Like, I pointed to you. He's like, yeah, but that wasn't where it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But that's how I learned.
It's the note you're supposed to be on, but not necessarily the right octave you're supposed to be.
Right.
So it's going to be the same note, but yeah, it could be. If you have a very high voice, you're not going to be able to sing the actual bass note.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you your actual pitch. Like if the sopranos are on A, I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
Like that's just a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to do.
So that's important. Like hearing the octave and being able to in your head go from one octave to the next based off a note. Right. And that's what I want to work on. Especially we can start a little bit tonight, but maybe next week we'll do more vocal exercises on this. But getting everyone to hear the pitches and be able to figure out in your head what those intervals are. And the octave should be the easiest because it's just sort of natural. You hear, yeah, and you can play some more octaves. Yeah. It's always going to be the same note, just the next time. So if you're singing in your head or you're singing it, just finding the next, that next note, the next, A from A or the next C from C. It's a big jump in the voice too. Whereas a fifth can be confused for an octave because they're similar. Have that neutral quality.
Yeah.
They're sort of they're perfect. The octave is also the perfect
That's deal
octave.
scientifically with the frequencies.
Yeah.
It's like right.
They're even ratios, whereas the others have more character because they're less stable. Yeah. So let's see. I don't know what time we want to run to. It's about an hour and a half or so. I don't know what everyone's schedule is like. But I don't want to overload everyone too much. So
can we do like simple exercises just to get like note names?
Yeah. And so we don't use a whole lot of solfege in the choir, but that's I think it's a good way to learn. Now, I think for me, there's multiple ways you can do it. And if you look on the second page, you can have either a movable or a fixed system. I'm going to use a movable system because I think it makes more sense for what we're doing. And actually, the third page, we can look at some basic exercises here. This is a good book. So this is a little bit of sight reading. And we didn't talk about rhythms today, but this part, at least like the first line, these are all quarter notes. They're black and they have a stem, not a flag. That's the little thing you see on the eighth notes. But just the straight stem and the black dot is a quarter note. Those each get one beat. And we'll cover time signatures later, but you can see on the side it says 2/4. So that means there's 2 quarter notes per bar. And you can see each one, the bar is this line that breaks up all these chunks, all these boxes. There's 2 quarter notes in each one, or in some of them, like the 4th bar, there's a 1 quarter note and then a quarter note rest, which is just silent. So this first part, if we're singing Do and Re for, this is D and E, so Do, Re, it's the only two notes we're using here. The first part, I'll play this first line. Do, Re, Re, Do, Re, 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 rest. Re, Do, Re, Re, Do, Do, Do. That's all seconds. And hopefully you can read that all right. So do we want to try everyone together? Yeah. All right. So this is, we don't really need more than one pitch there. Some people might sing higher. I guess you can sing down there too. This should work for most people. So if we want to try, this is 2. So 1, 2. Try it again. 1, 2.
We on 1.
Good. That's simple. Not too difficult, right? Can everyone read that okay? Say.
White door.
It's first part.
Raining. It's actually raining.
Well, oh yeah, this is, we're doing a movable Do, so we're starting with D is going to be Do, yeah.
Right. Nick, I don't know why if in this exercise they have left out the accidentals, the sharp signs.
The sharps and flats,
because
yeah.
they should have, it's a D major scale.
Yeah, so it should be F sharp.
But for some reason we don't know, they didn't write them down. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. On this one, since we're only using 2 notes, I guess they want to make it look simpler, but
yeah.
But yeah, the whole scale, this would be D major, would have an F sharp and a C sharp, which should be written right next to the, so D major has 2 sharps, let's see, right up here, this would be F sharp and C sharp. And once you have your circle of fifths memorized, you can look at how many sharps, just count, because if 2 sharps is always going to be D major. There's no other key with 2 sharps. It's always D major. So once you know that, and that is a little complicated, we may not really get to that. It's not necessary, but you can count out, it's got 2 sharps or 3 sharps or 4 sharps or 4 flats, and if you have your circle of fifths memorized, then you know what key that corresponds to. They don't tell you usually D major, they might, but usually it's just written like that, and the rest is up to you. So this is D major, but since we're only using 2 notes, neither of which are sharp, they left it out. So let's try the second line. Now, there is a repeat after the 3rd bar. So you see this symbol at the end, 2 lines with 2 dots like this. This thing means repeat. A normal bar line is just 1 line. 2 lines with the dots is a repeat, and that just means you go back to where the other one is, which you see is at the very start of line 2. There's 2 dots there by the time signature. Right? So you would go 1st bar, 2nd bar, 3rd bar, go back to the 1st bar, 2nd bar, 3rd bar, and then continue the rest of the line. Right? So let's try that, see how we do. So there's our pitch. 1, 2. Good. Is that any questions? Does that make sense? Oh, that is, it's a phrase marking. It's basically to say, sing those sections as a whole phrase. Which I don't really know why they added that here. It's kind of, maybe if we were singing it faster. Yeah. It doesn't really practically do anything. You'll see it in a lot of, especially like piano music, just as an expression mark, but it's probably one of the less useful expressions. It doesn't change what you're doing, right?
Well, with some instruments, it changes the way you play it.
Yeah,
Like
it'll
with
change
the
how you express it.
violin or
Yeah,
flute or-
yeah. And I mean, it would be when you're singing, you would probably try to hold those notes out and not let any space in between
They
those.
flow into each other.
Yeah, you could maybe take a breath at the start and end of the phrases. You know, so it's sort of it's there, but
Tie the words together better.
maybe yeah.
Usually that's what it is. Like if a word spread out across like 17 notes, it'll tie it together. That way everything is connected to that one word.
Yeah.
That's usually how it is in Arabic.
Yeah, and I don't see a ton of phrase markings. Maybe I ignore them, but maybe they're there. I don't.
They're there with the more complex pieces.
Yeah.
By the fancy composers.
Yeah. Now we can look at the third line and talk about the eighth notes real quick.
Pardon me, and what are the 2 and the 4 at the beginning? Are those?
That is the time signature, and we can talk about that a little later. But basically, the top number is the number of beats in the bar, in each bar, how you divide it, and then the bottom number signifies, in this case, quarter note, like 1/4 is quarter note. So if you saw over like 2/8 would be 2/8 notes per bar.
When we're watching like Kostya directing, and
Well, in church music there isn't usually a time signature because it's not about how many notes are in a measure, it's about the words. So usually in liturgical music you won't see that, but in every other type of music there is a time signature.
but you're helping us keep that time. But when you do this, and we're getting the notes as you do this.
And the, I mean, you'll see like with a classical composer, we'll have like a conducting pattern, and
so
that will correspond
the last
to
line
each
tells
beat.
you how the conductor in a classical sense would do it. So it would go 1, 2, 1, 2, and that would tell you that when he puts his hand down for 1, you'd sing the first note, and then the second note, he goes back up. And so he's telling you when to sing one note. So the third one is 1, 2, 3. He's telling you the first note's here, the second note is here, and the third note is here. So the time signature corresponds to what the director's doing in a classical sense, not so much with liturgical music, because like I said, it's more about the words and how they fit to the musical phrase than it is about how many notes per measure.
So like when you say we're singing too slow, for example,
that's just my personal preference.
That's tempo.
Okay.
Tempo and time signature are not the same thing. A time signature, it's a way of basically dividing it up on the page, and you know there's no tempo marking here at the top of this music, so it could play as fast or as slow as you want. Sometimes they will say a quarter note equals 130 beats per minute, or you know have like an Italian like moderato, so medium tempo, or allegro for fast. So those are tempo markings that tells the conductor how fast or slow to do it, but as it doesn't like 4/16 wouldn't be faster than 4/4 necessarily. Could be, but and
it tells you how the notes are divided amongst themselves,
yeah,
which we don't feel usually.
Yeah, so a lot of this stuff has to do with how you read it, and it's really information for the musician. It's not information that the audience is really going to get. The audience may not be able to tell between 2/4 and 4/4 unless it's really obvious in the music. But the musician will know because that's how they're reading it.
Nice.
And usually it does change how the music is felt and expressed, but again, it's not a guarantee. So now if we look at the third line, we have some eighth notes. So we have our quarter notes like this, which are filled in. They're half notes if they're not filled in. And they have a stem. An eighth note has a stem and a flag like that, or they're usually often grouped up in 2 or 4 and would look like that. Or it could alternatively have stems down and look like that. They mean the same thing.
And does it just mean like how long you hold it? Like,
Yes, they're the speed. So this this would be the same as this, the same value. But this is 2 notes, so it's twice as fast. So if you have a quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I played those all as eighth notes, 1, 2, 3, and 4, be twice as fast.
Twice as many notes.
Yeah, relative to the quarter. So when you read that, you just know this is twice as fast as this, and most of the time we're singing quarter notes or half notes, and so like in the case you can see on the third line, you start out with 2 quarter notes, and then you know the eighth notes are going to be twice that fast. So it would sound like those. That's twice as fast there. 1, 2, 1 and 2, right? So you know, oftentimes you're going from, you know, 1 speed to twice as fast or half as fast, slower, right? So let's try the third line just so we have the practice and you read some rhythm.
What you said, these 2 notes, you sing them a little faster. Does this not change the signature, the time signature?
No.
Does this not, the time signature doesn't affect it at all?
No, exactly. The time signature is going to be the same usually throughout the whole piece of music, or until they tell you it changes. But within that time signature, you can have quarter notes and half notes and eighth notes, and you can vary your speed with those different kinds of notes without changing the time signature. Again, the time signature is sort of how you group into these bars. So you can see if you count up the notes on the third line here, all of these add up to the same duration. 2 quarter notes in the first bar is a whole bar. In the second bar you have 2 eighth notes and 1 quarter note, which adds up to the same time. And near the end you have 4 eighth notes, which is equal to 2 quarter notes. Right? So let's try singing the third line. And I won't play it first, so you have to challenge me. 1, 2. Good. Is that difficult for anyone? Good. That's good. Let's try the fourth line while we're at it. This one has eighth note rests at the end of some of these, and also longer periods of eighth notes. So it's a little trickier. So let's try. D, 1, 2. Do, re, do, do, do. Do, re, do, do, do. Re, 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 do, re, 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 do, re, re, do, do, do. Very good. And then, what do we have on the third page? The next one isn't too much harder. If you look on the third page, you can try the first line of that. But that one has 3 notes now. And you can see this time they did put in the sharps to show that it's D major, because it's important because we have an F sharp on the third note. So, do, re, mi. If that was flat, it would be a minor scale. So let's try the first line there and see how that goes. D, 1, 2. Do, do, re, do, re, mi, re, mi, do, re, re, do, re, mi, do, re, mi, re, do, re, do, do. Did you catch it? Sorry. It's okay. So is that, how's that? Not too bad. It's a little trickier. Now you've got to read more notes, but not too many yet, so that's good. Do we want to try some more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go on to the next line then. This time we are starting on F sharp first, but same key. 1, 2.
Sorry, I don't want to nap, sorry.
So we are starting on...
So what key signature is that?
Not D major. So this so D. 1, 2 on this. Starts getting a little trickier to remember the right words. Let's try the next line. Let's see. This is
51?
50.
No wonder I was confused.
Yeah. Oops, we're on the right line. And we are starting again on F, which is me. 1, 2. Sorry, I made some mistakes. Let's try it again.
Did you repeat?
No, I didn't. I made some mistakes. Sorry, I'm sick.
Which one are we doing?
We're doing line 50.
Okay.
With the repeat.
With the repeat, yes. Let's try to sight read it correctly.
Yeah, a little slower.
Can you go
Yeah,
a little
yeah, I'll
slower?
go a little
Because
slower.
It's hard to.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Since we're not used to do, re, mi.
I know,
Can you
neither
just
am I.
comment?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. Well, it's a good challenge, you know. Alright, so this is me. 1, 2. Okay, who got it perfectly?
Quick question.
Uh-huh.
Do I have to leave these papers here? Or can I take them?
No, you take it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Alright.
And in fact, you know, you should think about, like, on the first page, whatever you don't understand of all this, let me know. Make some notes. Yeah. So, yeah. So it's almost 9. So do you have any final questions? And also, work more on next week. Like, what do you not understand and want to go over more? I'm gonna probably review everything a little bit because I know I covered it kind of fast. But
Are you going to go over the different scales?
yeah.
Okay.
We covered a few tonight, but
Scales, so like,
yeah, I mean, you don't have to be able to sing them from memory, but it's good to be able to sing a major scale, especially, you know, using your solfege. I think it's easier. Given a starting pitch, it's good to be able to sing a major scale off of that. Sing a minor scale off of that is a little trickier, but that's also useful. It's very rare that people have perfect pitch and can just know exactly what a D sounds like without reference. That's why we start with someone giving us a pitch and they use a tuning fork so that it's correct. Because yeah, you could make it up and you'd probably be on some note, but just on the right note. Any questions, comments? Yes?
Maybe exercises next time, like, you know, doing a solfeggio, doing simply a lot of solfeggio exercises. And
yeah.
Maybe rhythm exercises, using the rhythm syllables, just to like look at notes, and it sounded good when everybody was chanting together the solfeggio.
Yeah, and this whole book has a lot of these. These are like the first, it's not even the first 2 pages. There's a lot of exercises, but yeah, I want to work through. This book is good. I think it has good exercises. So yeah, so we'll be doing more of these. They get more complicated, of course. These are like the very beginning ones, but
and maybe sometimes we could use our church music as a sight singing exercises using the solfeggio signs.
Yeah, and so both of you, if you have you know, pieces that are easy, that are not, especially stuff that will be easy enough to sight read. But yeah, you can email me stuff. I also would like to take some simple piece and probably go through, mark up the whole page on explaining everything and go through that. So I think, yeah, I think next week I'd like to break down some of the actual music. Oh.
Is Kai recording us?
He's not recording.
All of you, yes.
No,
Not
but
him.
was he recording?
Yes.
So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
I
gonna be
was, yeah.
online, but we can take a look
Depending on.
Depends. We'll probably get wait until we have a good video.
But yeah, we will. I will eventually.
And then we
yeah.
can just review like before and after.
Exactly.
It's okay. I accidentally made the camera.
Yeah. No, I'm going to, and we're going to
probably
review
edit
them
the
all.
videos
I may take
and
the
get
best one at
good
the
parts.
end, or edit the best parts. You know, so it's not too much of me rambling.
Video editing in high school.